Ivy. Goodness. Okay, hold on. Hold on, people. I'm sorry. I'm a professional. Consummate professional. It's fine. People say, well, he's not professional. And it's probably fair. Okay, let's see. Audio. How's that? Is that better? Can you all hear me? Is that like sound less echoey?
I can hear you. Does that count?
Yeah, yeah. You're my primary audience. Okay, so to everybody else who's my secondary audience, yeah. Hi. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. Oh, Terrence, it's good to see you again. How are you, my friend? And you froze. Is he still there? Terrence. Is he frozen for anybody else, or is it just me? Hello? Am I frozen? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, is it me or is it what's going on? Can everybody else hear that? Oh my God. Hi.
Hello. Sorry about that. Apparently
Oh,
I'm not allowed to use something on
oh,
the work office Wi-Fi, and so it booted me off.
okay. So, but you're okay now?
Yes, I am okay
Oh,
now.
okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, so let's try this again. This time with more gusto and more panache. It's really good to see you again, my friend. It's been, um,
It's been a month. Has it been that long?
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm grappling with. It's been a month. I don't know. I feel like it feels like a lot longer than a month, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some of your adventures on the social medias in Greece, if you're trying to find a hotel.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was briefly. I was staring down the prospect of having to sleep on the streets in Thessaloniki because the hotel that had been arranged was they what happened? Oh, the card or something like that. So I had no hotel, but it worked out. I found a hotel that was not in Thessaloniki, but it was nearby, so it was adjacent, and it was fine. It was fine. It was like um, it wasn't. It was by the ocean, so you think that would be a nice thing, but it actually it just meant that there were more mosquitoes. So I ended up getting peppered with mosquitoes that one night. So in retrospect, maybe sleeping on the street wouldn't have been any different, you know. Like it was just really, really the but at least it wasn't cold. It's the Mediterranean. It was nice. So excuse me. Anyway, yeah, it was good. How are you? A long time. That was
Yeah, it was
we
good.
spent.
I mean, I just got back from KubeCon last week, which
Oh, that was
in
good
Salt
fun.
Lake. Yeah, it was like I think 9 to 10,000 people, I want to say. So
Oh, that all.
yeah, turns out people want to build platforms. That's
I'll never understand the attract. I mean, I love Kubernetes. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to build the platform on it. I just want to use the platform on it.
well, that's why you have platform teams, Josh. That's
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Well, even them, I don't like. I don't know that most people need to be spending time building their own platforms. It feels like this is it's not where I want to spend my energies. I'm a big fan of don't build what you can't sell, right? So
yeah.
to the extent that I can do it. Hey, it's my guy, it's Deshaun. Hey, man, hi. It's my friend. This is the one and only my teammate and co-host of this very channel, actually. Yeah. So anyway, we're a big fan of the idea that you don't want to build your own platform for nothing. I don't think most people at KubeCon are doing that. Obviously, I think there's just all these wonderful things you can do with Kubernetes, and to the extent that that's a force multiplier, it's really interesting to have conversations about it at KubeCon. And I saw you were there. Did you? So you saw Betty?
I did see Betty. I met her for the first time in person, and that was she's a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
A force of nature. Yes,
Yeah.
a benevolent force of good. Um, oh, there you go. Look at that. 12 factor. This is the new 12 factor manifesto. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
what I wanted to talk to you about this as well. But there's just so much good stuff, and build packs and and Deshaun, of course. Deshaun, do you want to come in and join us?
We should bring him on.
Yeah, just he knows he's got the keys. Just join us. Where is he? Feels like this conversation it would be right in his wheelhouse. Well, let's see. Come on, Deshaun. Like if we all if we all clap our hands, he'll appear. It's like isn't that what the Tinkerbell rules, or is that Beetlejuice rules?
I think it's Tinkerbell rules, right?
Yeah, I don't know which one it is. Either way, it would actually work for Deshaun. So yeah, this is good. I'm really excited you're here, man. This is you work over at the big old Salesforce ranch. In what capacity?
Yeah, so I'm a software architect working on Heroku things.
Nice.
Historically been kind of, I feel like, adjacent with just like a bunch of language things. Historically a Ruby person myself. That's how I kind of ran into Heroku and came for the Ruby, but stayed for I feel like build packs and wanted to solve platform problems for everyone around the world.
You said
There,
buildpacks 3 times. Right.
Yeah, the B word. Yeah,
there
I
he
feel like
is.
it's my eventual like it's my lifelong journey. Like I was around when we first started. Like one of my first engineering projects at Heroku was extracting the Ruby specific bits out of the build system. That would eventually become build packs. That's why I spent my like first holiday break working on at Heroku when I first started there,
When
and
did you
so it
first
only
start?
feels natural that like I've been part of CMB and kind of seen that through.
When did you first start at Heroku?
I started in 2010,
2010. Good
April
gravy.
of 2010. So my boss asked me like what percentage of my life I've spent at Heroku, and it's over a third of my life, which is I feel like both impressive and maybe depressing to think about.
Wait, how old are you?
I'm 39 and I've been there for 14 and a half years. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I guess the same. I'm 40, and I've been there for 14 and a half years.
Yeah.
Not Heroku, the spring team. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you done that math, Josh? Of
I
like
just
how
did
long you've
now.
been
Yeah,
working?
it's
Yeah.
depressing. Yeah, it's wonderful, but also it's weird to think that I've a
Dedicate
third
your
of my
life to
existence.
this one thing.
Yeah, it's and I still haven't made a dent. That's okay. I've still got more thirds left. Gonna like keep going.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And Heroku, of course, is it's not the original platform as a service, I don't think, but it would certainly one of the ultimate. It's certainly I think one of the ones that I would point to and go, yeah, that's how it should be done. Something like that. Certainly back in 2010 when I first started hearing about it. And when did it like first come out? Actually, I don't even know. It was 2008, 2009. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I came in and it was ready like 2, 3 years old at that point. And to be fair, like I feel like Heroku's original thing was the Heroku Garden like online web IDE, which I guess that's like what all the businesses are doing these days after we kind of got out of that business 5 years later. But I feel like they realized that it's hard to make money off of web tooling. And they took the like one-click deployment thing and turned that into a business when they pivoted kind of to that side of it. And
It worked out well. I mean,
yeah,
so obviously in implementation, it is an inspiration, but I think as a side effect, as a byproduct of the work that you all did to educate and raise people up, we got the 12 factor manifesto, and that has had just incredible repercussions, beneficial consequence. Both those words sound ominous. I'm not trying to say they're ominous. Like when you say repercussions and consequences, it makes it sound like something bad. But no, it's a tsunami of goodness, and I don't know. Were you there for that drafting the original draft of the?
yeah. Adam Wiggins kind of feel like went in his office and drafted I think the initial kind of thing on it, and then basically the company was only like 20 some people at that time, so it's a pretty small company. But we realized like one of the things that was really challenging, because you have to remember back then, right? It's like you're competing with still largely popular WordPress and
Oh
kind
yeah.
of basically people designing apps that way where it's like, oh yeah, like sticky sessions, horizontal scaling, those things like compete with each other, and like I still think WordPress today, right, is architected where the plugins are stored on disk and things like that. So, like it was a huge learning even for like in the Ruby community, like, oh yeah, like when we spin up a container or a dyno, as we called them, that your disk would go away. Like those were, I feel like wild ideas like 15 years ago.
Wild ideas.
Yeah.
And still today, there's people that are
Yep.
like, you will not take away my disk. I need disk.
I need
How am
disk.
I supposed to do this job?
Is this just not accepted? Like, I guess I'm curious because I'm not as involved on the Spring side, but like, has Spring not just drilled this into people at this point, 15 years down the line?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I mean,
12 factors, like that's been
Yeah.
part of the story.
and we have a resource abstraction that's been in Spring that was really a natural way to insulate your code from the thing that provides the bytes. So, for example, I remember in the early days of the platform as a service discussion, I was showing people how to use MongoDB GridFS from the Spring resource abstraction. Like you can write, you don't have to store stuff on file systems for it to be stored. It's just you can. And nowadays you have S3 and the like. And
Josh, where's my C drive?
yeah, C:// surely. So this is, you mentioned 2010. This is before you were acquired by Salesforce, right? You were still a standalone thing at the time. I remember December 2010 was the acquisition, and it was a Ruby on Rails only. It was Ruby, I guess. Was it Ruby on Rails or Ruby? But it was
Ruby, I think like Ruby generically, but I guess like really just Rack. I feel like Rack
Oh,
is
yeah,
like
okay.
the WSGI of Ruby, I guess using the Python terminology.
Right, in the servlet container equivalent
Yeah,
to the Java
exactly.
hooks on the stream. But either way, and at the time, it was only Ruby. But of course, you could easily see them writing on the wall that at some point it would have to get better at doing other kinds of sausages, right? Like so did that inform the discussion around build packs? Because I mean, Ruby is Ruby is Ruby. You can do that all day long, but now you have to like cater to variable workloads.
Yeah, I mean, buildpacks basically came out because of, right, like in order to do that, we needed a way to have like a language agnostic platform underneath the hood, which was for sure not how Heroku was originally built. Like, I feel like when you kind of build a thing and that's not a design goal, you don't kind of architect it that way. Like you try not to over
Yeah, of
engineer.
course.
And you're a startup, right? Trying to just get something out the door.
Get it right,
And
then abstract it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember, so when I came to interview at Heroku, one of the things that stuck with me was Adam Wiggins, one of the co-founders of the company. Like he said, I want Heroku to be a place where you can run anything. And that was definitely not true at the time, but like we were basically on the verge of like building what we would call the Cedar stack. And it's still being used today. We've worked on it for 15 years now. And one of the key things of that was buildpacks came out of that. So me extracting that code, that kind of story I was telling you, was like the precursor to the thing that would eventually become buildpacks and the buildpack API. And then, Pivotal and Cloud Foundry would kind of join that ecosystem and kind of take that as well, kind of outside Heroku, which was always part of the vision, right? Of, oh, like I think a good thing of like platform design is like not being able to predict what people are going to do with your platform and what people will build on it. And so, that was like a key, I feel like, thing in Gregor's talk at Devox. But I feel like one of the coolest things about being part of build packs and kind of shaping that of like, we always thought about these like language specific bits, like, oh, we're going to use to support Node.js/JavaScript, Python, like kind of the obvious things, but Java as well. But it was neat to see people build like R and Elixir, or even like Joe Cutner built
Or
like a
COBOL.
Minecraft. Yeah.
What kind of?
I don't know if we have Cobalt.
Yeah. What kind of
We do.
sick person would do that?
I leveraged Joe's work. I think he did like a precursor one, and then I took it when we had the new cloud native build pack API. So yes, there is a COBOL build pack.
Oh,
Oh man. So we can blame you, Deshaun, that exists.
And it's got legs. Like it's I did the little blogs and videos about it, and then some company that might have a vested interest in running COBOL at scale, they adopted it and forked it and went on their merry
That's
way.
actually that's so amazing to hear because I feel like being able to bring those technologies into kind of the modern container world and not having to like rebuild out your pipeline just feels like that's the point of this, right? That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And one of the so what is the alternative, right? It's important to establish that. At the time we talked about lift and shift, right? Which is not what we want, right? Because you can't really help an app that is just being lifted and shifted, right? That an app that is just, if you're just treating Docker like a new virtual machine, you're missing the point, right? But you've got to give the platform visibility into the different dimensions of your application's sort of scalability, right? And it can't do that if all it sees is an opaque virtual machine. But if it knows that you're dealing with environment variables and that's how you can expect configuration, if it knows that your application has a certain stateless shape and nature to it, if it knows that your application expects resources to be bound via config, all these sort of prescriptions, if you write your code in such a way to do that, the platform can meet you where you are, right? It can do some extra things to help you do failover and to make logging available and to provide databases in a convenient, consistent style as well as your email service and all that, right? Like all of that is anathema to lift and shift, right? Like the idea of just taking this VM. So when you said you have these build packs, and why do we do that? Why do we have these build packs? It's so we can,
There were so many other things that were happening at the time that Heroku came onto the scene. We were realizing that the business of being on the internet was a completely different thing, right? We had the iPhone now. So apps and what you were putting out there was being accessed in way different ways, and it needed to be in more than one data center. So there was a bunch of things that were kind of coming in that Heroku was saying, like, hey, here's a new way of moving. Think less about hey, go grab another 84 core machine and stick it in the closet, and think more how we can do this horizontally. So there's a bunch of things that happen there.
Yeah.
And the excitement around the Heroku git push of a URL, that was my introduction to Ruby. And then I just remember thinking, man, I wish I had this for Java. And now here we are.
We're living in the future, Deshaun.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's an amazing time. So that whole thing so you talk about COBOL, but you could just lift and shift through that build pack, but that would be, I think, a mistake, right? To the extent that you can in COBOL, I would definitely want to take advantage of some of these 12 factors, beyond just having a container. But the fact that you can do that, the fact that you can just create a container out of it is pretty cool. I mean, wasn't there like a WebSphere build pack at some point, right? You could do that you could do that. Just don't know.
There was like I don't remember what it was called, but there was like their light container, Liberty.
WebSphere Liberty.
Yep.
Yeah. So I like that. I like that build packs let you get on the platform, but then you can start to tease apart the program to refactor, to modernize, to take advantage of these 12 factors. And it's not so for folks who don't know, there's this thing called the 12 factor manifesto, 12factor.net, if memory serves. And basically it's 12 principles that seem just so nauseatingly obvious today, but that at the time, I think, they were so if I'm going to share my screen here, and this is a podcast that we're doing here, friends. So we'll read it out to you. Just trust that will happen. Hey, guess who's got a new laptop? And guess who's
Do you have to redo your permissions, Josh?
I'm doing permissions, and this is fun. This is what we do. So 12 factor app. There you go. Share. So you can see my browser, right? So I've got this is one of the very first times I've ever used just browser tab only sharing. So anyway, you've got code base, you've got dependencies, you've got config, you've got backing services, build, release, run, processes, port binding, concurrency, disposability, dev pod parity, logs, and admin processes. So these are 12 prescriptions. And can we basically walk through these a little bit here? Verbally, so people in the podcast can kind of follow us? What is code base?
Yeah, things to think about. It's and I see customers that are referencing these like, hey, like a better way to do this would be look at this 12-factor, look at this code base. Instead of having 5 different repositories that get combined into one thing, hey, and even that's okay. It's the idea of like, I've got a central spot to go and build this app. It's easy to identify what that app is made up of. And yeah, it seems obvious.
Yeah,
But
I feel like when this was written too, like Git was still becoming a thing, and so version control was a thing that was maybe taught in universities at the time too. So
no, it wasn't.
I
I didn't get
was
anything on
not.
version control. No. Version
I feel like I
control
learned some version
shared
in university
folder.
or something. Back in the day, but yeah, I mean, it's like I feel like like you're saying, Josh, right? Like some of these things seem obvious, but like I feel like if we rewind back 15 years, that like none of this was true, right?
None of it. Yeah, like
GitHub was like a like very early thing
I
that
wonder.
we all take for granted.
I see that they mention Git, Mercurial, and Subversion, and they even say in a centralized revision control system like Subversion, or in a decentralized revision control. I wonder if this is the actual text of the manifesto as it was written, 12, 13
It was. We definitely have not. It's probably worth speaking on this, right? Like Deshaun and I are part of this effort. So actually last week at KubeCon, Roku announced that we're open sourcing 12-factor. But what it really means, I know like some people take offense to how you open source a document, but it really is just like, this is a thing Roku came up with. It clearly has had some traction, has I feel like been a lot of the underpinnings of what we consider a lot of cloud native principles and other things, and has helped in various frameworks as well to talk about how to deal with stuff of like what the line is between app versus framework kind of thing. But I think a big part of this is like a lot of these have actually stood the test of time, I think, very well, but turns out a lot has also changed in 15 years too.
Priority wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. And so we're trying to like we want to work with the community, and we don't want it to be Heroku going off in an ivory tower again and like saying a thing. It's like a lot of stuff has changed in the industry around us too, and we should be working on a modern 12-factor that I think takes all that into account. And so that's why we're working with folks like Deshaun who are in this space, right?
Yeah. Okay, so that effort. Let's get to that in a second, but let's talk about what the old thing was. Just because I even this I think is worth rehashing. So code base, one bit of code per thing that gets deployed, right? So there's not shared code. You don't have multiple folders in a single code base that have to be sub deployed or whatever. It's just one repository, one deploy, basically.
Many deploys.
To different environments, but it's the same. Yeah, the whole thing is involved in being moved to a production or development or whatever. But it's not like it's just this folder or something. Okay, dependencies. Explicitly declare and isolate dependencies. This one is this basically encouraging not to vendor, basically?
I think to some degree this is trying to like have a manifest, right?
Yeah.
So you have to also think like I feel like we take for granted like lock files and things these days in a lot of ecosystem languages, but I do think like Bundler and Ruby was actually one of the first ecosystems that really pushed this concept through of like there should be a lock file that like locks down your dependencies with both like the dependencies and the transitive versions of. And so like when I go and deploy this app somewhere else or do like a installation of all the dependencies, that you'll get the exact same like resolution somewhere else. Like 15 years ago, this was a thing that was just being done, right? And I remember how long it took in the JavaScript community for npm to get a lock file, right? Like it was very contentious, and even the Ruby community where kind of this was coming up. So I think this was pushing this thing of like, please explicitly declare and isolate your dependencies here, and so you don't have to like piece it together, kind of like on this new system you're deploying your app to.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we had before in the Java world, before we had the Maven style dependency tree thing that we could deploy in our pom.xml. Before we had that, it was for me, it was an ant file. And in my CVS directory, in my CVS repository, there was binary versions of jars that I pulled off of random places on the internet. And even today, going back to the code base and the dependencies, even today, there are still places where teams are compiling a Java class file and deploying that onto a server in some class path somewhere. So
Yeah.
even though this has been around for a long time, we still have a lot of work. There's still corners where this hasn't been seen. It hasn't met the light of day. So we still have a lot of work to do. And while we're at it, why not make it better? So
Yeah. I mean, I think like the Python community is probably another good example of like, I think you have Poetry, which has a lot of stuff, but like Pip, which is by far like the most popular thing, is not, is not a manifest thing. You have your requirements.txt, but it doesn't lock that stuff down. And I know that the Python community is like hungry for standardization in this space.
So in the Java community, we have Maven. Maven created the, it's a specification of the dependencies, but it's possible to have drifting dependencies. But in practice, if you want to deploy anything to the centralized Maven repository, they have to be all pinned down, right? It has to be completely reproducible. So in theory, as long as my app depends on fixed versions, then that is a reproducible build now and 20 years from now as well, with no drift possible. And that's super useful. We don't have a lock file because it's sort of built. I don't know what I'm not sure if I understand. It's except for the case of drifting file, like snapshots. Like if you have a snapshot dependency, then in theory you get the new dependency bits. But
yeah,
you can't deploy anything. Sorry?
The mechanisms that we have inside of Maven, and there was some change, and there was kind of a push to change it in some of the other languages. You can say at least this version. Right. And that is a part of the specification where I could say, hey, 1.0 or above when I'm declaring my dependencies.
Right.
And we don't do that in all places. I guess there is some options.
It's possible.
But yeah, it causes other problems.
But highly discouraged. You want to pin these things down, And
I think that what this gets you is like when you do deploy this to prod or containerize it, like you just want to like remove surprises, right? That like, okay, like like it is what I expect it to be and not a totally different version of like the Spring framework that I'm getting in prod that I haven't been like developing against, right?
No, yeah. So this is one of the reasons why we are such big advocates of so-called Uber jars or fat jars or whatever. Because you don't have a separate class path, you don't have a separate library path basically, whose dependencies change based on whether somebody has updated the application server or not, right? With the Spring Boot artifact, you've got a one jar, one artifact that has all the dependencies in there, and it doesn't matter unless the only thing that could impact that externally is the JVM, right? The choice of JVM, but that's almost never happens compared to, for example, Ruby or Python or PHP or whatever. It doesn't. The JVM almost never breaks your code. And nowadays we even have GraalVM. So now you have statically linked, self-contained native binaries. So they are completely, immovable, inflexible. There's no way to change anything about them, which is nice. So this, I think a lot of communities have internalized this. Is all I guess I'm trying to say is dependencies, fix them, nail them down.
Yeah, you just mentioned the JVM being the option, even in Ruby. There was nothing here that said define your runtime version, right? I'm Ruby 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. There was nothing that defined that. So that, hey, because or maybe it is.
We added it to Bundler. That was like one of the things on Heroku because we basically had that exact problem. It was just like, okay, how do I know? Like, let's say you push Ruby, how do I know what version of Ruby to give you? Because Ruby doesn't, it doesn't necessarily have some of the same backwards compatibility guarantees. Or even if you have backwards compatibility guarantees, maybe using some new syntax, right? Like, I don't want to like put some interpreted thing in prod that's just going to break at runtime, right?
Yep. And this is something that I'm running into today, like that idea of, hey, here's my repository. I would also like to define this is the JVM that I'm using, and we have like that .sdk manRC that helps me a lot, and I can use that. But yeah, that's cool. Like just that idea that we didn't really say that in the original 12 factors, but if we're going to revisit dependencies, maybe that's another good piece to add on there.
Yep.
As I think of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I wish we could do it the other way around. I wish that the build tool determined the version of Java that you're running as opposed to reacting to, like in Maven, you can say, I'm using Java 17 and therefore I want you to compile against it. But I would prefer that I could start with the build tool and have it download Java 17. Like let that be a dependency as opposed to a prescription,
Yep.
Like if I'm running Java 21 and I specify I'm using Java 17 in my code base, it'll compile the code in such a way that it'll run on Java 17 without any problems. And that assumes the legendarily, historically very, very good backwards compatibility of Java is in play, but it's not the same as I'm using Java 17. We are running exactly the same environment. All people who use this build will get exactly the same JVM. It's just sort of, yeah. Okay. Config. This one's, I think this is the single biggest unlock of all the prescriptions. This one to me, just it's magical. I mean, and half of the beauty of Spring Boot is that we took this one to heart. Really, really leaned into this idea of configuration as external configuration should live externally. I mean, that's things that are ambient that change from one environment to another should live in the environment as opposed to in the code base that gets compiled and then deployed.
Or worse, right? Let's revisit. Where were we before? What did we see before?
ADI, context.
The zip file, the jar file that would go to production, we would hand it off. It would sit on some shared server somewhere. And then somebody on the other side of the wall, on the operations side of the wall, they would open up that jar file and they would put in the dev environment properties file. And then they'd repackage it and they'd deploy it to dev. And then when it was time to go to test, they would grab that jar file, pull out the dev properties and put in the test properties and then put it into the test environment. This was a problem. How come it worked in dev and stage and prod or in dev and stage, and then when it got to prod, it broke? What happened? Because we had these manual processes affecting the jar file and something would break in random places. And this made it so that we had an artifact that was moving between environments that didn't change. It was signed and sealed and we could see that, hey, this is the same. It wasn't, I didn't break it.
Yeah.
Something else in the environment.
Function of config.
Yeah.
I mean, this one, you actually talk about, there's another idea here, another factor called, which basically you specify that services should bind to ports, but again, this assumes where does the port come from? It comes from config, comes from an environment variable, right? Like backing services. The idea with backing services is that you have things that are described to your application at runtime, and that are used to connect your application to sort of infrastructure, databases, message queues, email servers, whatever. Again, how do you tell your app about those backing services? Through config, through environment variables, right? Like it just same thing for logs, right? Like how do you know where to send the logs to? Again, it's going to be a config. It's just config is so big. Honestly, that's my favorite one of these 12 factors. First place I ever saw that really taken to heart was Heroku, right? Like that platform just got it right. Cloud Foundry got it right eventually, right? We came after Heroku, obviously, but yeah, huge.
Yeah, I think this helps tie back to a lot of the stuff too, just like code base, right? Like this allows you to have a single code base in version control to have many deploys. It's like, I think config is at the heart of your ability to do that, or you're stuck doing the thing that Sean was talking about, which, makes my ears bleed to hear that story a little bit.
Developers today don't know how good they have it. Like this is what we had to live through, and this is why this is all here. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Too true. Okay, build, release, and run. To what does this refer? I wonder.
Yeah, I feel like you gotta always talk about like the state of the art before. And remember when people would like FTP changes directly
Oh,
onto servers?
PHP.
Yeah,
We talk about it like it doesn't happen anymore, but it does.
yeah. Yeah, but I just feel like you get your like VPS on like Linode or something, right? And you
Mhm.
like FTP your change directly into prod, or it's just like people literally like making changes directly on their prod server, which like it's significantly harder in container land. But I think what this is trying to tell you is like, no, there should be separate stages where like there's a thing where you take your code, you build an artifact, you take that config we were just talking about, you apply it to that artifact that was built, and that's how you get a release that gets run, right? Like this
Yeah.
kind of very segmented regiment process. If you need to make a change, you just go through that pipeline again. And maybe you don't need new build, maybe that's just config, right? But just like making these kind of distinct steps here.
Yeah, and you trust the pipeline.
Yes.
Always trust the pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, this is continuous delivery, right? This is I think this is a nice way of saying that.
Yeah, and this helps you get stuff like rollback, right?
Yeah,
Things like
because you have a
those kind of
process.
things in that pipeline. Yeah.
Speaking of process, execute the app as one or more stateless processes. So, in the simplest code, the standalone script. The execution environment is a developer's local laptop with an installed language runtime, and the process is launched via the command line. On the other end of the spectrum, a production deploy of a sophisticated app may use many process types instantiated into 0 or more running processes. So they're basically you create a process that can be started and then stopped. There's no magic about it, right? It doesn't have state locally, right? Is that what we're understanding about this? Is
Yep.
that the takeaway from this? Asset packagers use a file system as a cache for compiled assets. A 12-factor app prefers to do this compiling during the build stage. Asset packagers can be configured to package assets during the build stage. So this one discourages sticky sessions and local state and anything that would give a request a given process affinity for a particular request. Basically, it discourages
Yep.
all those things, whether that's in memory state or session state of the router or whatever. Okay, I mean
didn't realize it says explicitly.
Yeah.
Sticky sessions are a violation of 12-factor and should never be used or relied upon. I know that taste. I know the reasons why, but I didn't realize that it said that explicitly.
It's very clear.
This is great.
Yeah, and because it's the hardest thing to scale. This is why I love a Spring session, because you need sessions. Just don't make them sticky. It's fine as long as the sessions move with your cookie. Then who cares, Like we have Spring.
Yeah. This feels like a key for horizontal scalability, right? It's just like this thought of stateless, whether that's stuff on disk or for sticky sessions, like some other kind of state you're storing here. Like what do you do if you have a sticky session that node goes down, right? Or that process dies? Like what happens to that user? I think it just makes it challenging, right? So this to me is really just like the stateless process kind of principle here.
Yeah, and I when you think about a process that has no state, that implies that it can be restarted, since there's no like preconditions, right? Nothing needs to be there for it to start, since there is no state. And that gets you into also to other discussions, which I think we talk about in the other factors. But basically, if this process dies and it gets restarted in another computer, it's fine. That's the system works like that. That's okay because we have no state. Okay, port binding. We talked about this one, but basically, the 12-factor app is completely self-contained and does not rely on the runtime injection of a web server into the execution environment to create a web-facing service. The web app exports HTTP as a service by binding to a port. So basically, the platform gives the app a port to which to bind, and the app does so. Seems straightforward. Okay. Let's see. Concurrency. Aha. This is getting back to that the idea of statelessness. Scale out via the process model. So if you want to have more instances of this service. So this is actually kind of interesting. Any computer program once run is represented by one or more processes. Web apps have taken a variety of process execution forms. For example, the language that shall not be named runs as child processes of Apache, started on demand as needed by request volume. Java processes take the opposite approach, with the JVM providing one massive Uber process that reserves a large block of system resources on startup with concurrency managed internally via threads. In both cases, the running processes are only minimally visible to the developers of this app. In the 12-factor app, processes are a first-class citizen. Processes in the 12-factor app take strong cues from the Unix process model for running service daemons. Using this model, the developer can architect their app to handle diverse workloads by assigning each type of work to a process type. So this is the proc file, right? Like in Heroku and even via the buildpacks in Cloud Foundry. Well, except for the Java one. So you have a web process, you have long-running background processes. I don't think this is all that controversial. It's just telling the platform what you expect this thing to do and setting it up to do so successfully. But it's interesting. What is this? I don't quite understand what it's saying via the. Why is it mentioning that? What is this? Let's see. So basically, this is saying that you can scale out horizontally by having more processes, since there is no state, right? But it's not really prescribing whether that individual process has the ability to handle its own threading as well. It's just saying that in addition to that, we go horizontal, and the program should be written accordingly. Is that the idea?
Yep.
Okay. Easy. It's actually the reason I'm struggling with some of these is because they're so blatantly obvious. I feel like there must be something more profound that I'm missing. You know, they're so utterly obvious today. It's 2024. I would be shocked if this wasn't just common sense for most people striving to build software on the internet today. But
I feel like you say that. I feel like, but every time you say that, Deshaun has some story about someone who's not doing it.
I mean, I've seen them, but it just should be. You know, I mean, okay. So exposability, maximize robustness with fast. Again, no state, so your program should be able to start up and shut down quickly and clean up its own state. They should do the right thing given system signals like sigterm and syskill. You know, okay, good. So they should processes should be against sudden death. What a sentence.
This one comes up a lot because now it's not about necessarily disposability, but it's about that ability to meet demand and scale down when that demand goes away. This factor today really is about that curve, that scale, being able to stand up quickly, have the things that you need, being stateless, being able to shut down quickly. And again, not every app is doing that. So it's just these little things. If we can just kind of take these little things into consideration, then the future, the flexibility of our app, the cloud native ability of our app increases. But each one of these has a part to play in how we're delivering for the future.
Yeah, I think this last part of sudden death is really important too. Just like this, I mean, hardware fails just happen. You know, like how many times is like some AWS or some other node die? Hopefully not that often, but it can happen, right? And like you got to be able to account for, maybe you couldn't clean up completely correctly, right? But like your system can't crash because of that, right? And so you have to take that into account in your design as you're kind of developing your app.
And it links to this amazing article, which I confess I don't think I've read before, and it's on the Linux, lwn.net, and it's called "Crash Only Software: More Than Meets the Eye," and it's talking about how Linux is built in such a way that if you just yank the power out of a machine, it'll probably be fine. You have a journaled file system. Your computers are built in such a way that they can crash and still start up quickly the next time. Wow, that's an interesting the rabbit hole. We'll go into that one some other time. Dev prod parity. Keep development, staging, and production as similar as possible. So for the Spring users, this means don't use profiles. And basically just this kind of feels like it's orthogonal to the idea that you have one build and multiple deploys, right?
Yeah, I think you also had to think about the time, at least in like the Ruby and other space. Like Heroku was a big proponent of Postgres at the time, and
I am now.
I feel like Rails at the time, which is kind of funny because I feel like they're now recommending it again, was pushing like SQLite for local development, but then you'd run like some other database in prod, and then if it then didn't work out the same in prod, like maybe you shouldn't be too surprised. Like you were literally using a different data store, and sure you can have ORMs and other stuff that can abstract a good chunk of this stuff away, but I mean sometimes you do end up dropping down, to kind of native data store or whatever things as an example, right? And like maybe you should try where you can to kind of align like the stacks where it makes sense. And I think as a result of that, like Postgres has gotten a lot easier to install
Docker
compared to 15 years ago. Yeah, for sure Docker, but even just like I think installing on a Mac, like installing a Postgres, like and booting that server was really hard 15 years ago, right? Like it wasn't prepackaged.
Not to mention there was no Windows build up until Postgres 8. So Postgres 8 was about 15 years ago. Yeah, there was no Windows build. So if you wanted to do it, you had to figure out a virtual machine, because this is pre-Docker, with Linux, which again, you have to figure out Linux, which, no great shakes. But if you're not used to it, it felt like a bit of a hurdle just to be able to use a database. And we did the same thing in the Java community. We have a H2, HSQL and Derby, which are really, really good, like SQLite. They're very, very good.
They're
meant to be, they're usually embedded. And some people build their code in their development environment against that, and then they use the production database. Nowadays, I would just use Postgres start to finish. I would
also, not too long ago, my laptop only had 2 gigabytes of memory or 4 gigabytes of memory. And if I was working on one project on Postgres, and I was working on another project on Oracle, my day was like half shot changing my environment to run these things.
Oh yeah,
right.
Fair point.
I can't run them both. I don't have the Mac. I can't run them both at the same time. So I had like these massive scripts in order. Well, I'm going to work on this side of the building, and I got to change things around. We've come a long way.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very good point. So it's interesting you mentioned Rails. Let's see, Ruby on Rails. So the adapters for MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. Huh. Okay. Anywhoozleby, moving on. Logs. This one's huge. I love this one because it has an immediate effect on your as a developer. You get this. This is like take a vacation factor. This is don't worry about it. Just basically make sure it goes to standard out, however you want to do that, and the platform will figure it out from there, right? This is like a direct, one less thing you have to worry about. You just make sure it goes to standard out, however you want to do that. Just get it there, and then you don't have to worry about appenders and rolling and all that. The platform, treat logs as an event stream. Make sure they're observable. Make sure that the program emits logs. But I love this one. Huge.
There's one sentence in there that really just stands out to me. The logs have no fixed beginning or end, but flow continuously as long as the app is operating. Just this idea, like it's a signal that we get, and we got to take care of it.
Yeah.
Make sure it's going to the right place. Like that's powerful. Logs, even then, but logs are kind of like we do our debug out, and we're writing stuff in there. But then at scale, like it changed in different places. Like, do I have access to the logs? There's an implication when I have a 12-factor app that I will actually get access to those logs. But that was powerful. I didn't always have access to the logs.
It's huge. Now, this gets us to the last one, run admin management tasks as a one-off process. So basically, just if you do need to do a thing, but only do it once, you don't have to bake it into the program and then remove it in the next commit. And you shouldn't log into the server in production. This creates a new blessed job, or it's a thing you're going to run, and there's a path to do this without actually just FTPing directly into the server. Which is nice. And
yeah. I'm not saying that I've ever made the mistake of having like a database migration in my startup script on a jar that actually got deployed to multiple instances, multiple Tomcats. And the fact that both of them started up and tried to do this database migration completely halted the production environment. I'm not saying that I've ever done that, but I could see that somebody may have done that. And maybe that wasn't the right way. So this is just a good, be forewarned. There's a better way. Like when you're doing something like a database migration, maybe don't make it a part of your app's startup process. Even though you can, maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah, do it once. Okay, so this is what we had. It's 15 years, and I honestly, if everybody lived these processes right now, you'd be in a better place. This only works. Though, because this is for developers. This is what we as people running and shipping code should care about. But it implies, rather conveniently, I think, a Heroku or a Cloud Foundry or something has to honor this promise, right? Somebody has to. This is a promise that if you write your code in such a way that you'll get benefits. Well, who's going to confer those benefits, right? And that's the platform. And honestly, I think this just feels like a nice gift. If you just follow these steps, you'll get to a production application that can do the right thing in a production environment.
Yeah. And I also strongly believe that even without a Heroku, a Cloud Foundry, even without that, if you are developing, even to land on a VM, if you're developing code and following these 12 factors, the maintainability, the longevity of that code is going to be better. The ROI on that code is going to be better because it can move to a different environment. It can be one of many of the different cloud native landing zones or platforms that are available. But the factors allow that to happen.
And
don't require it. They allow it.
Yeah. So to the extent that a build pack allows me to get my program, all of these are multi-language, right? These principles apply to every language and runtime out there. The only thing that is language specific is the bit where you take the artifact and turn it into now a container, right? But back then it was a bunch of folders with some scripts in the right directories, right? I mean, but either way, that the very first step is the only part where we care about what language you wrote it in. Everything else is just nice and generic. So talking about that, going back to this for a second, before we talk about the new 12 factors, these build packs, we talked about the classic build packs variety there, where we have a artifact in and you have a bunch of folders that come out and they have scripts in well-known places. And then I don't know, what is it, 2017, 2018, Joe Kuttner and our own Ben Hale sort of got together and put together this idea of a cloud native build pack. What was the MO behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just realized across both Pivotal and Heroku, we were trying to figure out with Dockerfile and kind of that momentum, like where build packs fit in, and felt like we still had contributions, and this can't be the modern world that we're moving towards, and there has to be a better way to containerize apps based on all the learnings we've had of, I mean, build packs being run in production to large success across multiple platforms, and customers kind of being impacted by that. And so we also realized that the ecosystems had fragmented, right? Like Cloud Foundry changed the API, Heroku changed the API since Cloud Foundry adopted build packs, and maybe there should be one ecosystem and a single API, and kind of, yeah, like we should work together more and not just like in our own silos. I think those were kind of the two big motivations, right? Like let's move away from there's clearly like this momentum and thing and huge benefit of like standardizing the output format of like I think you gain a lot from picking an artifact format like OCI, Docker image thing where like the challenges with our proprietary formats is one, like even between Heroku and Cloud Foundry efforts, like our toolings was not shared. Like we were building our own isolated ecosystems. So that was like the fragmentation part. But then there was this whole other ecosystem that was building all this fantastic tooling around container images, right? So like, why don't we tap into that, like retarget our thing, and then also like take our learnings. Like, I think there's plenty of things that it was just like, if you could do it over again, like, would you change stuff, right? Like, I think some of the things that we didn't realize at the start was composability being
Yep.
such an important piece, right? Like, oh, that, I think in the early days of Heroku when we designed build packs, like we made the decision like you're gonna pick a build pack, right? Like you're gonna have your Ruby build pack because you're building a Ruby app, your Java build pack, and if you want a Ruby plus Java app, like maybe those should be two separate apps. But I think Heroku was wrong there, right? Like, turns out like we weren't expecting the JavaScript behemoth where every app is also a JavaScript app these days, and then of course you have your JRuby or whatever stuff too of like JVM proliferating across a bunch of ecosystems where it's like it was annoying because our Ruby build pack also had to maintain a bunch of Java stuff to support JRuby,
Yeah.
and it's because our composability story wasn't fantastic, right? And so I think knowing that and being able to kind of do it again, it was like, how would we redo some of those things? And so I think that was a lot of the motivation behind trying to bring all these efforts together.
The
I love it.
composability was a huge deal. The idea that, yeah, I had one builder, one stack of build packs that everybody used. If COBOL wasn't in that stack, then COBOL didn't go to production. That was huge. If I was doing Ruby or Java, it was the pipeline had the same stack of build packs that were supported and maintained by the platform team, and I could send anything through there. And if there was a build pack to do it, then I had a path to production. But things like certificates, right? The company certificates could be added so that we could do all the magical things with TLS across the org. These are just massive benefits that when I think about even just going back just one step to Docker containers, just the managing of certs, that's a completely different ballgame. It's a completely different beast that there's a lot of headaches and there's a lot of pain. And a lot of people are being called in the middle of the night because they have to handle small things like that build packs have been taken care of for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the big benefit for some of this stuff for any organization, not even specific to Heroku Cloud Foundry, but like taking some of those benefits of what those platforms bring to the table with build packs is with something like cloud native build packs. I think for the first time an organization can say, what if I could standardize how Java's built across my entire company? What if like every Java app in my company was not a snowflake that had to be managed and maintained? What if like I didn't, as a platform team, have to pull teeth to get people to update the underlying OS image for all these apps, right? Like these are real problems we hear all the time at KubeCon, at all these conferences of like, this is literally what it means to be on a platform team. Like you have to solve these problems, and it is unmanageable. I feel like these. I feel like these teams are being asked to like move mountains with kind of the tooling that they have in place sometimes, and like when you do have to make a compliance change or do a CA certificate thing,
Oh,
like that is so hard when you don't have standardization across your company. Like how do you do it?
I don't know. I don't think that it gets done. Like if somebody says, "Hey, we've got a platform," and they say that they don't use build packs, do they really even have a platform?
and
Because
by the way, like how long is we just said Heroku started in 2007, and so they've been building for 27 years now, or sorry, 17 years now. And would you say you're done? Have you
No.
figured it all out? No, I wouldn't. Why? Just why? Windows was created in the 70s as a platform for operating systems. I wonder if they would say they're done. Probably not. Yeah, this is not something I would take on as a side project.
yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, that's been, it's hit home a lot, I think, for a lot of people talking to them, just like they didn't even realize this was a problem, that they had, which is actually kind of amazing, that you can shine a light on it. Of like, I think there's a lot of Stockholm syndrome going around because it is what a lot of the state of the art is, right? Like if you, it's what's being communicated and talked about a lot of times, of like, this is how you're supposed to do it. And so even just simple things like, oh, like as a company, you want to be able to enforce specific versions of Java that you use in your company, right? And you want to be able to fail a build for a thing because now you don't support that version of Java. You literally can't do that with Dockerfile unless you're just gonna like revoke the runtime like off of your Artifactory server, right?
Right.
And there's so many things. I don't want anybody watching today. Like,
And listening tomorrow.
yeah, Docker files. Just who maintains it, right? The developers have enough to worry about with getting the right versions into the code, but then to take the additional responsibility of creating the Docker file and all the risk that implies and maintaining that and doing all the patching and care and feeding that goes into the Docker file for everything you're taking to production. That's just, there's so many better things, so many more valuable places to be focusing on, especially when there's something that's already handling it for you.
Do you feel like the modern day app developer can just be a full stack developer, like in most companies? Like I feel like one of the realizations coming out of DevOps was I was using this phrase like the fuller stack developer, where it's like, it's like a full stack of pancakes is like 3 pancakes tall. I feel like the modern day developer for a lot of people is like 5 pancakes tall, right? It's like it's not good enough just to know your back end technology like Java, Spring Boot, etc., whatever you're going to use in the front end, and then kind of the business domain of the product surface you have to. Now you have to like do the stuff you're talking about, Sean, of like, I now need to containerize my app, update the operating system. Like I own that now, not the ops team. Like they may provide the base image, but it's my responsibility to make sure it's updated. Maybe if I'm like part of a platform, I now also own like the cluster, like with kubectl and all those things. Like I feel like the amount of responsibility of the average, modern day developers, like way more surface area than it was like 10 years ago.
I put developers into like different buckets, and I have like a distance, a line where, hey, I'm doing a git commit. I think that's where most developers want to be. That's where they want the responsibility to stop, is the things that are in this repository. This is where my sphere, my responsibility lies. I do a git commit on this repository, and then the platform concerns, the rest of the stuff. Most developers don't want to care about what region or what runtime or what base OS image. They don't care about those things until they need to. There's another group that does care. They're squeezing out all the extra bits and extra milliseconds out of that next layer, how it's being containerized, etc. And then there might even be another bucket that is platform. Like they understand, like, hey, I've done this and I understand a great way to deliver apps at scale. And they're straddling that line between platform engineer and developer. So there's kind of like buckets, and it's how far into the production journey do you go? Where does your responsibility go? But I think that most developers would just like to be here in this first bucket of I just want to do a git commit. It runs on my laptop. I've got a container. I can Maven Spring Boot build image. I've got it. It runs. I'm tying to the databases. Things are working. And that's where they want their concerns to stop. Once it gets to production, they just want to see that it works. They want to see their logs. They want to see their metrics. They might even want to say like, hey, here's the threshold. I know, don't call me unless I go outside of these ranges. They might want to share that. And that's it. So there's kind of like different size buckets. But I think that most developers just want to do the git commit. There are a lot that still kind of straddle. And I think that we're interfacing with those levels of engineers because of our positions. But I think most people, just want to do a git commit.
Yeah,
that's me, certainly. It's just happier. I mean, compartmentalization is, it's the reason people are able to be happy in sad times. It's such a fundamental skill. It seems maddening to me that we seem to be careening headlong in the opposite direction in terms of software, trying to take more and more and more into our sphere of influence and responsibility when building software, when it's the antithesis of how we are designed to function as people.
And now I'm kind of like I've jumped up 1,000 feet. For a long time, we heard this like shift left, shift left, shift left, and what a lot of teams and companies thought was like, hey, put more responsibility on the developers. Shift left, let it be their responsibility. Shift all that responsibility over there. And now when I hear that term, I'm like a little like maybe I get like shakes. There's some real benefit in like shift it to the platform. Let the platform take care of a lot of these responsibilities for me. The rebasing of images, the packaging of images. When I say platform, I also think of the pipelines as a part of the platform. Like that is it. I just want to do the git commit, and I want the pipelines. I want everything else to kind of get taken care of for me. Even the idea that we had this Jenkins file concept that I was a big fan of. I'm a developer, and oh yeah, I'll take care of it. My pipeline is going to be so much better, and don't worry, I'll get it to production. Here's my Jenkins file. So every repository had this pipeline, not just packaging, but doing all the things, the CI and the CD of everything going to production. Because I thought that, hey, there's tons of value in there. No, I want the platform to do that now. I want to do git commit, let the platform handle everything from there. Just give me some visibility. And I'm confident that that's where most developers want to be.
Yep. And okay, so if we agree on that, and we agree that buildpacks v3 and later are the way to go, what is, and we get that the 12-factor manifesto is the way to go. What is the future of the 12-factor manifesto look like? What does this new stuff look like?
Yeah, that's what do you think is missing? That's the whole idea here is like, we've learned some things. Even some of the questions that you had were like, hey, that's kind of obvious. Is it? We're building abstractions on top of abstractions. And I think that the whole refactor is, are we addressing the right things for today, for 2024? So we're getting feedback, and that's a really fun project. Go out and look at the blogs that are being posted and the little conversations in the Discords and on the Twitters and stuff like that. It's really interesting how people are kind of reacting to this idea of like, ooh, what are your 12 factors? If you were to make a list of 12 factors, what would it be? Right? That's kind of the whole idea is like, are we addressing? And we're trying to not do it in a box, right? Open it up, because there are teams that are doing amazing things all over the world, right? We have quantum computing now and crypto and all these other things. What does it mean today? The other piece is the 12 factors were very forward looking. There was a bunch of things that right now we're taking it for granted. There's a bunch of things that like, wow, this is an amazing way to move forward. What does that look like today? Like, there's a bunch of smart people in the ecosystem. How do they bring their ideas to the fore? What's it going to look like for the next 10, 14 years? That's the idea of the refactor. So it's been a lot for me. It's just been a lot of like thinking, all the conversations that we have in our community and conferences, like thinking about like, how does this bubble up? How does it sit? How would I boil that down into this is the way we should be doing software? That's what I'm trying to do. What do you think, Terrence?
I think it's been fun, one, being outside of the Heroku bubble and just like interacting with folks outside. I think that's, I always call like open source like a way you can collude legally in public without anyone telling you you're doing something illegal. And I feel like it's just like you get to work with just a lot of really smart people that you don't necessarily agree with all the ideas, but like they push you to think, in a different way, and I think that's been fun. Vish, who's kind of the person leading the charge on the Heroku side, who's the chief architect over there, I think he's been doing a lot of like, how can we do backing services and these kind of ideas. Like, for sure, the world has improved instead of just providing configuration variables all over the place, right? and I'm really curious like where we can go with that to like hopefully like introduce standards or practices that people adopt to kind of make negotiating, talking about secrets where you aren't just sharing them over like environment variables, things like that. So I do think there's a lot of like really good ideas of moving the needle forward uh, where we are today. And I think even like as great as some of the logging and observability stuff is, I think we're trying to figure out like we ideally like the factors stand the test of time for the next 10 to 14 years, but
Right.
I do think there's a lot of stuff that people would benefit from, like given this like very agnostic factor, like maybe there's some more practical guidance like on the thing that's written to really help you, right? Like a lot of stuff has happened, I think, in the observability space, especially, right? Of people are looking for help and have opinions on like as an app developer, that's probably one of the things you actually do care about, right? Of like you want to take on and like you care about how your app looks and performs in production, so you can find errors before your users do, or when you have to debug a thing, like you have visibility, so you're not always having to like SSH into that specific box, right, to figure out your answers.
Well, I guess I'm looking at I'm kind of trying to figure out what is the next thing for Heroku itself. Do we have anything we should know about out there on the old roadmap that you can tell us without having to assassinate us?
Especially since it's recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've announced on our blogs and things of I feel like one of the really exciting things happening at Heroku has just been uh, replatforming and working kind of more in the open source tooling. I think one of the challenges of kind of being ahead of the curve is you build a lot of your own software. But what happens there is that there's a certain point where you stop being ahead of everyone because you're on an island. Even if you're like working on principles and things like 12 factor, like buildpacks, like there's a lot of places where you have bespoke software that you wrote on the current platform, and I think embracing kind of all the stuff in cloud native and all these ecosystems means you're going to see Heroku a lot more participating in open source and kind of in these ecosystems. And 12 Factor is one of those plays. Cloud native build packs. We're doing a lot with open telemetry as well there, and
Oh,
so it'll be nice to kind of bring like I don't think we're gonna go like change the world of like all the underlying primitives and things like that, but I think cloud native build packs is a really good example of like, okay, like I get this container thing, there's a lot of momentum behind it, it has solved a lot of problems. It doesn't make sense to create our own standard there, but I think it is helpful to work with the community to create like what should that developer experience look like, right? And maybe a way people aren't thinking about. And so, like that, I think that's where we want to kind of invest our limited innovation and resourcing bucks, right? Like in the open source ecosystem.
I'm a big fan. Big fan. I should put a link there to ye old Heroku. The
One of the
they're
topics.
one of the one,
Yeah.
huh?
I was going to say one of the topics around build packs is that's been kind of popular and an exciting button around our conversations is different architectures, right? The ARM64, the Apple Silicon that we now have build packs for Spring. Our default build pack that's coming out on Thursday allows us to build images for ARM64 or x86, right? Long time coming, but this is still exciting. I don't know what kind of machine you're on right now, but all my friends have the Apple Silicon. I'm a big fan of the Raspberry Pis. So this as a feature of the build pack where I didn't have to go and do something specific for a bunch of different Docker files. That's just something that it's top of mind because of Thursday. And build packs makes this another easy move, easy thing, stands the test of time. I don't have to go and do a bunch of rework because I've got a build pack that takes care of it for me.
Don't wanna, don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of work, kind of being closer to some of the stuff on the spec side and other things that we've had to do to kind of account for that. But man, it's nice to solve in one place and be able to do it everywhere. I've definitely interacted and talked with companies that are people are wanting to move to Graviton and ARM, Graviton being the AWS specific thing for cost saving reasons, right? And uh, the nightmare that it is for these companies to like make that move is like it's real, right? Like every time you have a snowflake, it means this is a problem that like sure the platform team can help, but it means it boils down to the app developer to have to make that change and manage and maintain that Docker file and kind of move that stuff over, even though that base image for sure already exists because the company has done that at the platform level. But like, man, it's a manual process for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, I mean that is going to be such it's a win from an operations perspective because you have a central image. It's a win from a developer perspective because you'll get there. You'll get from here to production, and then you don't have to do the work to get it there. You just push the button and let the thing do the work. It's very rare you get a win where both sides are better off for the change.
Yeah.
Hi, good. Wow, it must be getting up there.
What time is it over there?
Late in the evening. 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock. It's 9 hours ahead from here. So 10, 11. Yeah, 11 p.m. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hello. Hola. Desde San Francisco en los Estados Unidos.
The options. Just having the options. Hey, my pipeline, my platform is going to build an ARM64 image and an x86 image. It's going to put it in my Docker registry. I don't have to specify which one I'm going to pull down. If I deploy to the Graviton, I'll get the ARM64 image for the Graviton. And if I deploy over here to an x86, I'll get the x86 image. That's all been taken care of for us. There are some workloads that want the consistency of performance that they'll get from a Graviton, not just the cost, etc. There are some workloads that need the performance of an x86 and what they provide. You have options, right? The platform team has options. But again, the developer over here on the git commit side doesn't mind. Put it where it's going to do the most good, or deploy it to both and let me evaluate where it's going to do the most good. And then we can go.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like any good architecture is about providing options and, letting you wait as late as possible to kind of make that decision when you need to, right? Like, I shouldn't have to pick my architecture and platform at the beginning. I should be able to pick it as late as possible in decision where it makes sense. I think as an app developer, like, the problems that I need to worry about are like how to get my app to work in these architectures, right? Like it may not work out of the gate, like if I'm doing some native C extension kind of thing, like on ARM, right? Like from x86. So those are the problems I should be focusing my time and attention on, right? And
so this gets me to we talked about, I mean, build packs are great because they are language and platform neutral atoms, right? But have you, I mean, so what kind of things, are there specific integration? Are there opportunities that we're missing, for example, where maybe further optimization for a particular workload could be good? Now that we've solved generic, infrastructure concerns in a cross-platform kind of way, is there anything to be gleaned or gained from, I don't know, what I'm saying, like a specialization of some sort? Have you tried Vercel, for example? Right, they are.
Yeah, I have used their product. Not recently, but I definitely have.
They lean in on JavaScript, right? Which is it's a choice. I just think that's kind of interesting as well. I prefer the track we're on. I prefer this idea of the biggest tent possible, right? You want to be able to support as much as you can. But Heroku started off as a Ruby thing. Do you ever think about like optimizing for a particular workload again? I don't know. I don't know what I'm asking. It just feels like there's this. I prefer, given the two schools, the two different approaches. I think you started with a language specific focus and then went general, and I think that's actually really quite sage, and seeing now that there are other companies doing the opposite, I kind of
Yeah,
wonder
I
if
guess
they're
to
going to
chime in there, Josh, I think how we were able to manage it and continue to be successful in that space is so one of the things we have is a languages team at Heroku, and
Ah,
I think it's actually one of our secret sauces. And basically, like we have specialists in each of those ecosystems because to get and deliver that, you know, I think like language native experience, like you do need people who get and understand and are experts in that ecosystem, right? I think it's why, a lot of the Paketo stuff for Java and other things because they have access to the Spring community, right? Like I think
right.
that I think you need that, right? Like I think where Vercel does the JavaScript thing, they do it well. Like being able to double down on ecosystem and really get and grok that's really important. So at Heroku, we have basically these language experts across all the ecosystems we want to support. And that is a fundamental thing that makes our language experience like what it is. Like
Amazing.
I think without that, like you would just be building these like generic things, right? Like uh, I I think it reminds me a little bit of like remember when there was like those schema generated things for like API clients and they were like pretty bad in the early days and it's just like oh take the schema and then like generate some like blob for Ruby Node Go, et cetera, right? And it never felt native. It just felt like someone just took this schema thing and plopped it on and made
Right.
like runnable code. I think that's what you get if you don't understand those ecosystems. So I think you gotta I think the trick with the platform side is like you gotta have a little bit of both, right? Like you need to be able to architect stuff well, and then I think having access to, I know on the Pivotal side, like having access to those consultants who work on those projects in those ecosystems and be able to like drive that back into the Cloud Foundry project help made it better, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so you need that feedback loop, right? And I think if you're not doing that, then it's really easy to just build a thing that doesn't feel good for anyone.
And a lot of that
Great
language
point.
specific expertise shows up in the
In
build
build.
pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shows up there.
Yeah, I
Why?
mean that's exactly what that team works on, right? Is like they're in charge of the build packs, but that's only like part of it's a large part of that experience to be
Yep.
frank, but like it is only part of that experience. But I do think you need that, right?
100%. You couldn't have, you know what? You're right. I didn't, I was, I don't know what I was trying to say, but what I wanted to say was what you just said, which is exactly that. Somehow with build packs, we get the best of both worlds. You get this thing that insulates you from the vagaries of any particular language when it comes to these common concerns like logging and whatever, while also optimizing for each particular platform in runtime in the build pack, right? Which is what you want. It's the best of both worlds, and you can't do that if you're focusing on just one thing. This is actually it's a really amazing thing. You get the if you're dealing with a VM, you can't optimize for Spring. You can't optimize for Rails. You can't optimize for whatever. So this build pack, wow, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
a fan. This
So
stuff's got
some of
legs.
the
It's gonna be big. You
yeah.
watch.
So some of the fun things have just been like being able to have that cross pollination across like on that team. Like I spent like 7.5 years on that team, and so it holds a special place in my heart at Heroku. But it like being able to like intersect I feel like one of the benefits of being on the teams you get to like intersect with so many different ecosystems and you of course like disagree on a ton of things because each ecosystem has their own like
Yeah.
values and things there but like it's amazing some of the cross pollination that you can kind of get that I would love to see more in this space
And
Yes.
we see it at the language level, right?
yeah
I assume like, hey, this language does things this way, Ruby does things this way, Python does things this way. Yet we see some of those things now bubble up, and we're the recipients of it in the JVM now. The JVM has a lot of these cool new language features that others have, and the same thing is happening in the build packs. That's what I heard.
yeah
Well, I'm a fan. You've convinced me. I guess I'll go ahead and use build packs.
aren't you a build pack advocate, Josh?
Huge.
Since it's part of Spring? Come on.
Yeah, and now that it's now that there's even built-in out-of-the-box support for ARM. Oh, yeah, just try and stop me. I just got one of those newfangled M4 Maxes. Now I can run Slack and Chrome and Teams at the same time. And I'm gonna. Yeah, what blows my mind is actually the build that you do. I'm not sure if this is still true, but I remember getting it to work before, and the GraalVM native image that I got running inside of buildpacks on Linux ran faster than the native image on Mac.
Yeah.
What? What's sorcery?
That was definitely a thing.
That you saw that too, right? Like,
yep.
How?
Yeah. I haven't redone that on this M3, but on my M1 and my M2, that was a thing for a long time. I don't know if it still is. I haven't gone back and visited, but yes, the startup in the build pack image, that with the native build pack image, it was milliseconds faster than starting up on Mac.
On Mac directly, a native Mac binary.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it just, anyway, build packs are magical, is I guess the TLDR here.
Do you have data in the Spring community? Since I think Spring is probably the only framework that has like native integration with build packs of how widely used it is. As a selfish build pack maintainer, like I'm always curious on that kind of data.
I don't know of any information off the top of my head that I could reference.
No, I just work here. Nobody tells me anything.
Yeah.
But
I have this.
not enough. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, not enough.
If there's even one person not using it, then our job is not done.
I did a one-off build pack for the ARM64 to support native images, and it had, last I checked, it had like 50,000 downloads. So there was definitely a demand for some one-off unsupported thing for Raspberry Pi. That was the thing that kind of proved the value at the start and proof of concept that, hey, this is a path forward. But yeah, at scale, I have no idea. I just know that there was a lot of feedback, right? There's a lot of demand, and I think that the movement with this ARM64 architecture it's just going to increase.
Is there interest? One of the conversations I've been having kind of on the build pack side has just been like the support for ORS as an export format. Like, is there interest in, I guess, like building an artifact that you can just push to the registry that doesn't contain the rest of, I guess, like the base image and other stuff underneath in kind of the job ecosystem?
I've not seen that. I have not seen that interest at all, in fact. And maybe it's just the part of the ecosystem I play in. There's a lot of value in having that, right? One of the things that I talk about a lot is that with Spring Boot, with the applications that we're generating, we can create a SBOM for the application. And then with our build packs, we can create an SBOM for the build pack, right? So the things that I'm pushing, that I'm sending down the path of production, I have a very good idea of what is being delivered, what's in that signed package that's going to production. And when something needs to change, because of the SBOMs, I know where to go. I know where I'm affected. So yeah, that's an important piece of the conversation that I have.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess some of the use cases I was thinking in the Java space would be like Android APK compilation, where I've seen people like build the whole image and they just go and like pull out the one layer and then toss the rest of it away. And I wasn't sure if that is more of a thing where it's just like for sure you can like set up your own build pipeline and you like get the GraalVM native stuff, but like, do I just want to like get the GraalVM native binary for my app and just like have that without kind of all this kind of stuff around it, if that's like similar to, if you were treating that like APK where it's like, I just want this thing. Because you can imagine, like, you talk about like the Jenkins files thing from a little while back of like, what if you could pack build and ship a thing like in your build pipeline to like your registry, right?
Yep.
Like for any kind of artifact.
Yeah.
Like homebrew plugin, whatever, you name it, right?
Yep. Now I see where you're going, and now I'm like, I can see value in that. But I haven't had anybody ask me about that. So I think I'm going to take a note right next to this one. This idea of, I said, letting you wait as long as possible. And I put quotes. Terrence Lee. But then this idea of just a pack build to the registry directly.
Yep.
I could see where that may be valuable because we've gone through this journey of the artifact has changed. Like for a long time, the artifact that we were keeping in Artifactory was a jar file, and now there's less and less of those in my org's Artifactory. Now it's containers. Like that's the artifact that we take to production. That's the thing that gets created and goes beyond. But this is an interesting idea. So that's something that maybe I'll bend your ear on.
Yeah, for sure. I was just at KubeCon. I was mentioning it to Josh earlier, and it was a recurring topic at like talking to the WASM folks of like they've been kind of building a bunch of WASM things, and you got to figure out all the build pipelines for all these languages to compile to the WASM target, and then like they're talking about like basically just shipping like OCI artifacts like straight to registries, and it just feels like I should be able to really leverage the tool chain of all these build packs that have already existed that now you just want to configure a thing a little differently to like compile to a WASM target, right? And I feel like it fits that use case really nicely.
There's one of the other similar Graal VM. Its output. It's Polyglot API where I can compile JavaScript or Python or Java, and I can compile them using Graal VM, and then I can connect the dots. So I can build this composition of different languages, benefits of things that I've taken out of the registry. Hey, I just want to grab that thing. I don't care what it was written in. I can plug it in.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like this is becoming more and more thing like in more ecosystems, right? I think the future's not totally clear, but it seems pretty exciting.
It does. So what can people? It's what?
I said this was fun. Thank you for the invite. My wheels are going.
Yeah.
This was a really good conversation for me, and yeah, thank you.
Great for me. I hope it. And obviously, it was. What people don't know is that Terrence here and I have had part of this conversation twice now. So
much longer this time around, though.
Right, and much more successful, I think. We actually sat down to try and record this before. What happened? Oh, the internet, the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Crap.
In that one corner of that room.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the dead zone.
I watched that episode. I do remember that.
Because you have the StreamYard. Oh yeah. Okay, so it part of it got truncated, and it was a recording anyway, so it never was live. It was just anyway. All that to say, I wanted that episode to go out, and this has been so much more fun. As fun as that one was, because we were in the moment. We were in Antwerp at the DevOps show. This has been great. I cannot tell you how much fun this has been. Some more questions for you before we wind down here. Are you on the internet? And do you want to be found? And if so, where can people find you there, Mr. Terrence?
Yeah, I'm still on the begrudging age-old Twitter thing as HONE02.
Whoa. Hold on. What is it? Wait. H1.
I'll just type in the private chat. HONE02.
Do you want to tell the class what that means, or?
I think it's just a handle. I feel like HONE was a handle I had in like 6th grade. Oh. And I was a big believer in consistency, but then like all these platforms are like, you need to have 6 characters. So then it was just like, you had to just like throw some numbers at the end to like make it work. And it kind of stuck. And then I never was a big believer of LinkedIn, but I feel like it has become for sure the like social media platform of choice for at conferences and things these days. It's like everyone's like, can we connect on LinkedIn? Yep. So I'm also on LinkedIn with the same handle.
Well, you heard it. You heard it here first, folks. Find him on LinkedIn or the Bird website. Are you going to join Blue Sky yet?
Yeah, I think I need to make a Blue Sky account. I think that seems to be where the world is trending.
It's so good. And you know what it's best. You know what I love about it the most? You can do DNS, so you can have your own domain.
I just did that today.
Yeah, I did that. It's so satisfying because now you know it's you, because you wouldn't have authoritative control of your own. Who else would have authoritative control of your DNS records besides yourself? It's great. I mean, to the extent that they can trust that your DNS website is actually you, but whatever. Anyway, thank you, Terrence. Just thank you so much, and thanks everybody for hanging out. I hope you got something out of it, and thank you, Deshaun, special guest. Although as you know, whenever you want to come, you're always, you have the keys for a reason. Bye everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.